I came back from a 1-week work trip to find out my son was in a coma. His mother didn't inform me about it. What upset me was that she left 2 days ago for her girls' week out, leaving my son alone. Before we continue, thank you so much for your support. Every like, comment, and view means the world to us. We're on a mission to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and we'd love for you to be part of that journey. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and let's grow together. Now, let's proceed. I returned from a week of flights in fluorescent halls expecting the small chaos of home. My son's off-key game music, shoes abandoned like landmarks, my wife humming at the sink. The key turned. The house answered with a hollow stillness that made me set my bag down more carefully than usual, as if sound itself might shatter something fragile. His room was open, the bed shaped around an absence, a controller face down, a worksheet with a doodled rocket reaching for a smiling moon. No note. No message. My phone showed no missed calls, only a days-old photo from my boy of our cat sleeping on my suitcase. Next door, Mrs. Diaz unhooked her chain and held my wrist before she spoke. My son had been taken to the hospital on Wednesday. She had called my wife. An ambulance came. And then my wife left 2 days ago for her girls' week out. The intensive care unit had that polished cold hospitals wear after too much grief. A nurse said his name with practiced kindness and led me to the glass door of a room where machines breathed like patient animals. My son lay small beneath the white sheet, lashes resting on cheeks too pale, a forest of wires tracing invisible borders across his skin. I felt my breath working like it had to ask permission from the air. When I asked how long, the nurse gave me the number, and I felt it carve something out of me. I called my wife and got voicemail. I scrolled her social media and found a bright table lined with stemware and captioned laughter posted the night after admission. A heart emoji, a lyric about freedom. Under the hospital lights, the photo looked like a dare. I took my son's hand and read from the nearest book aloud, because speaking his name in sentences was the only language I trusted. The first clue met me back at the house, not dramatic, just ordinary enough to be damning. A ring of sticky amber on the kitchen counter, an unwashed highball glass with a faint, sweet smell I recognized from nights my wife called fixing my sleep. She'd been dissolving her prescription pills into sweet drinks for months, bragging to friends that a sleep cocktail beat counting sheep. Next to the sink, the family calendar carried her looping heart around Girls' Week Out. On the island, beneath mail and a sales flyer, lay a folded discharge printout from her last pharmacy visit, half-torn and stamped received. In the trash, a lemon iced tea bottle without a label, its cap glued shut by sugar. I watched the Ring camera. My wife at midnight, stirring something into a tall glass, laughing at a call, leaving the glass beside the bottle, then drifting down the hall in perfume and bare feet. At the hospital, the pediatrician spoke softly about the toxicology findings. No street drugs. No alcohol. A sedative, common, legal with a prescription. At levels that did not belong in a child. Not malice, he said, but a dangerous mistake. A concentrated mix a small body could not absorb without help, and he had been dehydrated from basketball practice. The nurse mentioned that the combination can slow breathing, and that time alone was the harshest enemy. I remembered Sunday night texts from my boy. Game went late, thirsty. We need more iced tea. I remembered finding a cup ring and thinking nothing of it. I remembered my wife waving a hand when the pill bottle chirped the reminder, saying, "God, stop micromanaging me from the airport." My mind arranged these pieces in a pattern I did not want to see, but once the picture formed, it would not blur again. Evidence piled up not because I hunted it, but because neglect leaves footprints. A message forwarded by a mutual friend from the girls' trip chat. My wife complaining that I always overreact, that she'd left the boy with soup money and he's nearly 16. A neighbor's text, time-stamped the afternoon he collapsed. He okay? Knocked, but no answer. The Ring camera caught my wife leaving with a suitcase 2 mornings after admission, sunglasses on, posting a boomerang in the driveway. At the house, My son's practice bag slumped near the door, a half-empty water bottle rolling inside. The iced tea bottle from the trash waited on the counter like a confession, and the sticky glass held fingerprints that were hers. When the doctor told me, "He will likely wake. His body is young," and we were fast, I leaned on the wall and let that sentence stitch me back together just enough to stand. Relief came with a shadow. I knew exactly how we had arrived here. When she finally walked into the hospital room, she carried the faint smell of lilac and expensive bars, the kind that repaint nights. "You should have called me if it was serious," she said first, as if the situation had failed to meet some unspoken threshold. I watched our boy's chest lift under machine rhythm and asked her why she left. She said it had been planned for months, that I travel all the time and people survive. When I mentioned the sedatives, the glass, the bottle, she denied, then minimized, then gaslit. "You're inventing this because you need a villain." I said nothing. I had learned over years that my silence unsettled her more than volume. When she accused me of trying to embarrass her, I let the accusation hang in the antiseptic air and wrote down the time she said it. Every sentence would matter later. Every shrug. I didn't rage. I documented. I downloaded the camera clips and preserved the metadata. I photographed the glass, the bottle, the counter ring, the calendar. I requested the toxicology report and asked the pediatrician to put in writing what he had said about likely ingestion and timing. I printed her posts and the trip itinerary she had enthusiastically shared online. I called our bank and froze the card she used for treat yourself, as she called it, the one I had funded and she had mistaken for weather. I called a lawyer and asked about emergency custody and protective orders concerning substances kept in shared spaces. I changed the school's emergency contact and took my son off any list where her silence could become policy. Then I moved to the guest room, closed the door, and slept beside a stack of labeled envelopes like a man guarding seeds before a winter he knew was coming. She tried charm first, then threats, then tears. She told friends I was overdramatic, told her mother I was cruel, told me I was making a tragic accident into a weapon. I let her perform. I collected the performances. In quiet hours at the hospital, while my son's monitors drew the green sawtooth of stubborn life, I prepared. The lawyer taught me the choreography, petitions, affidavits, sworn statements. Mrs. Diaz wrote what she had witnessed without dressing it. The pediatrician wrote in careful medical language, not accusing, only outlining cause and effect the way charts do. Substance present, dehydration present, supervision absent. The ring camera timestamps did the rest. When my son stirred for the first time, his fingers searching like a moth's wings for someplace familiar, I placed my hand there. "I'm here," I said. "I'm here now, and I'm not leaving." Courtrooms are theaters where truth is forced to use its inside voice. My wife arrived wearing regret like a scarf and confidence like perfume. She spoke of a tragic misunderstanding, of a husband prone to control, of a boy who surely grabbed the wrong cup while she was in the shower. Her attorney smiled the cool smile of people paid to turn fog into shelter. When it was my turn, I did not posture. I placed the bottle in its evidence bag on the ledge. I handed up the photos, the report, the video stills of her mixing and leaving, the post from the trip, the timestamps that threaded a single, stubborn line through her story. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask the judge to feel. I asked the judge to see. The room went very quiet when the pediatrician's letter used the plain phrase, likely ingestion from an unlabeled container. The judge's ruling did not roar. It landed with a steady thud that sounded like a door closing. Temporary full custody to me, pending final orders. Supervised visitation for her. A prohibition on unlabeled medications in any shared space and mandatory classes on safe storage. Reimbursement for medical costs from marital assets she had used for leisure. A warning that social media could not substitute for presence. Outside, she caught my sleeve and searched my face for the outrage she could spar against. I gave her only the sentence I had saved for the day my quiet work finished. "You left him alone in his darkest hour, and then you left the room." My revenge is that you don't get to leave the consequences. She tried to speak, but consequence has its own gravity. It took her words from her and kept them. Back in the hospital, my son woke more often, his eyes swimming and then settling, his voice a rasp turning slowly into a real sound. We built a ritual. I would read the rocket worksheet aloud, and he would smile at the moon he'd drawn, and we would pretend it grimaced because it didn't like being smiled at. When he could eat without nausea, we celebrated with the soup Mrs. Diaz had made 3 days earlier, warmed and stubbornly good. I packed a small bag for when he'd be discharged, soft shirts, his favorite hoodie, the one that made him look like the beginning of a story. I went home that night and stood in the quiet kitchen where a ring of amber had first told me the truth. I scrubbed the counter until the stickiness surrendered. Then I put the glass away, labeled every bottle in the house like a man building a language where care was not negotiable. People think revenge is fire. Mine was winter, slow, deliberate, and survivable for the one I swore to keep warm. I did not burn her life down. I closed the windows she left open to the cold and made her feel the season she chose. I did not humiliate her online. I gave the court a clean mirror and let her see herself in legal daylight. I did not scream. I built a quiet border around my son and enforced it. In the end, she faced not my fury but her own echo. I took my boy's hand and left the courthouse, the afternoon sun making a white line across the steps like a finished tape. He squeezed twice, our old signal for "I'm okay." I squeezed back, once meaning "I've got you." Behind us, the door swung shut on its hinge, and the sound it made was not thunder or applause. It was the click of a lock finally used for what it was made for. In the slow weeks after the ruling, the house learned our new rhythm like a song you hum until it becomes breathing. My son's laugh came back in small, deliberate portions, the way spring tests a window before it opens. We labeled everything together, vitamins, sports drinks, even the sugar jar, turning the kitchen into a promise that nothing dangerous would hide in ordinary shapes again. When he asked why I wasn't angry anymore, I told him anger burns fast and leaves you cold. What we needed was warmth that lasted. He nodded like someone older than the year he'd just survived and taped a handwritten sign on the fridge. "We choose care, on purpose." She tried to send gifts, expensive sneakers, a limited edition jersey, a letter that smelled like a store trying to sell the past at full price. I returned them unopened with a copy of the court's instructions clipped on top, not as punishment, but as a map. On the few supervised visits she attended, she blamed work, traffic, and me in equal measure, and my son looked at the clock the way you look at a bus schedule on a rainy day, practical, distant, already halfway home. I didn't coach him to feel anything. I just showed up, every time, with snacks labeled and a quiet that didn't need defending. One evening, months later, we passed the hospital on our way to a late practice under floodlights that painted the street in silver. My son squeezed my hand twice, our old signal, then added a third squeeze, new and certain. "We're good," he said, not as a question, but as a verdict. I looked at the lit ICU windows and thought about doors that open and doors that finally do their job. Revenge, I decided, hadn't been the gavel sound in court or the frozen cards or the silence outside those glass doors. It was this ordinary night with nothing hidden in it, a life labeled correctly, and a boy who knew exactly where his father would be when the lights came up. She called once more, asking if we could move past the narrative. I told her we already had, past narratives, excuses, and the kind of love that confuses indulgence with care. The line went quiet in that way that tells you truth has finally taken its seat. I hung up, handed my son his water, clear, simple, his name on the lid, and watched him run toward a future that didn't have to look over its shoulder. Winter stayed where it belonged, outside the door. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us.